I think the thing that really got me to sit down and work was someone had said, if you write a page a day, you will have a novel at the end of the year. I was like, I can do that. I can't write a novel, but I can write a page.
That's really good advice.
It's the incremental thing. It really is the thing.
Hello and welcome back to Diagonal Media's The In Crowd, a podcast about people in film, TV, media, and how they got where they are. And today we have Michael Rubens with us. Hello.
Hi.
Hello, Michael.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
And this is a momentous occasion because this is our first in-studio podcast recording of The In Crowd since before 2020.
Really?
So
this is the first post-COVID.
That's correct. We've only done them hybrid. We've done virtual ones on Zoom, or I've been here and the person's been on Zoom, but you're in person.
Right.
And it's awesome. So
and
thank you.
This will be like the patient one. Like this is going to be a mass, infection event.
Yeah.
For the next, whatever the next phase is.
But I wanted to tell everybody a little bit about you, Michael. Emmy nominated, 4-time published author, producer, correspondent on Samantha Bee for 7 seasons, which is like, wow. And you're an actor, a writer, a director. You're also a husband and a father.
I am.
And do you have any pets?
No pets.
Okay, no pets at the moment, but maybe soon. And the list goes on. So I just wanted to welcome you and say thank you for being here.
No, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So, part of what we like to do on the In Crowd is talk a little bit. We have a lot of incredible people on our team, and we release this on social channels to, help people find their path in the industry, because I started this because I didn't know what I was doing when I got in.
Yes.
And I wasn't doing what I wanted to be doing.
Yeah.
And I'm a little closer to doing what I mean, it's a long path,
sure.
But I'm way closer to doing what I really dream about doing now than I was when I first got into the industry, where I was doing more, coordination and logistics types things, but I wanted to do more creative.
Right.
So can you tell us a bit about how you started?
It's funny. I often, especially when I was at Full Frontal with Samantha Bee, the interns or the production assistants would ask to talk about the path, and I'd often be like, I don't know if this is a good path for anyone to take, because I feel like I've had this very sort of meandering and not very intentional path, although I did have intention of what I wanted to do, but it was always balanced out with a lot of caution on my part. So basically when I was younger, I wanted to be an actor and I wanted to be a writer, and I particularly wanted to be an author. And I started off at Carnegie Mellon at the Theater Conservatory when I was in college, but very quickly I was like, I want to get a regular education, and I ended up transferring. And then other stuff happened. I transferred, I ended up studying Japanese. I went and I lived and studied in Japan for a few years. I traveled and did stuff like that. But I ended up coming back to New York City, and I was doing, weird theater with people that I knew from Carnegie Mellon. And sort of gradually got into the production world. I helped out as a PA on shoots. I ended up working for this strange, because I spoke Japanese, this Japanese production company that was making a show. And I learned how to do field production, how to go out with a crew and shoot stuff and write a script and everything for that. I got a job at CNN and was a writer there and was a field producer. And so stuff sort of happened. And I ended up at Oxygen Media, which was launched as this was going to be this new feminist channel. It was going to be super cool. It was not going to be like, and then it became exactly what it was not going to be. But at that time, it seemed interesting. And I supervised a show there, and I did field production. And at that point, someone said, there's this show, The Daily Show. Have you been watching it? And I hadn't really been watching it that much. But they've got this new host, Jon Stewart, and they're looking for a field producer. And I was able to then apply, I had enough of... I produced these pieces. I'd done pieces that I'd written and been in myself. Some of them were kind of funny. I had some scripts that were kind of funny, and I got hired there. And I think that was more...
around what time
this
frame
is,
was that?
oh my God, this is 20 years ago.
Yeah.
This is 2004, which is weird because I think I'm 35, right?
Right, yeah, well, we both are.
Yeah, exactly. So I realize this has gotten very long-winded as a wind-up for how I got into it.
No,
but
it's
awesome.
It's
I sort of,
excellent.
in many ways, kind of, I don't know if I lucked into it. I had done work up to that point that allowed me that once my foot was in the door, I could present them with some stuff, and that got me hired. And I don't know if it was on the strength
Yeah.
Probably wasn't on the strength of what I sent them, more that they were so desperate for a field producer at the point.
I'm intrigued about the pivot from Carnegie Mellon acting to now I'm going to produce and write. You said you've always wanted to be a writer.
Yes.
And so how did you know that? Were you writing when you were a kid?
I think, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that when you're young, like I would read books and I'd be like, this is incredible. And I want to do this and provide this feeling for someone else, and I wanted to be able to do that.
What is that feeling?
That feeling of being lost in a narrative so that you don't even realize that you're reading, right? Like you are filled with this sense of wonder and awe. That's what I wanted to do. I don't know if I've achieved that, but I have written books.
Yeah.
But I really wanted to do that. But also, like, I was like I think like many people in this field, like I probably had ADHD. I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't get anything done. It was only later when I was able to discipline myself to actually make stuff and learn how to write. So, yeah.
And so that pivot that came, but you were at Oxygen. What were you doing there? Because I'm so fascinated about like the career starting.
So backing up a little bit, I was at CNN Financial Network.
Okay.
And I was writing for one of their financial shows. And they were going to launch a whole financial thing for women. They were going to do a new show. And when I got there, the day that I arrived, the people who had been hired to do that had been let go. And then they were like, well, do field pieces for our main, middle of the day talk show thing. So I started doing that, and then ended up another sort of personal finance show started that was field based, was Your Money or Your Life, or Your Money and Your Life, something like that. And so I was overseeing a staff of field producer and overseeing the writing of the show. And so that's what I was doing at the point that this opportunity at The Daily Show, which was really the major pivot, to this on-ramp of this very different life.
So you were doing financial writing.
I was doing financial writing.
And so then you found yourself in comedy.
Yeah. But I was always, at that time, I was always still trying to write sketch stuff. I was doing, this weird downtown theater stuff, trying to write scripts.
That's what I want to know more about, the weird downtown theater stuff.
So especially in that period of time in New York, in the 90s, late 80s and in the 90s, Richard Foreman was a big influence for a lot of people, this very sort of stark, absurdist theater. And a guy that I'd gone to school with at Carnegie Mellon had been sort of his protege. So he was doing these absurdist, bizarro plays, some of which were great and some of which were probably very trying for the audience. But so there was kind of a community around that. So, I would get a chance to perform and be on stage and feel like I was doing something.
And then that's always been a passion of yours.
Yeah.
Absurdism, comedy, which kind of like does dovetail within The Daily Show. I mean,
I guess I'd always, and before I had done some improv comedy at college, and, we all thought we were geniuses and, because we were doing improv comedy at college. So it was a weird transition.
Was Jon Stewart hosting The Daily Show at that time? No, it was a different host.
So Craig Kilborn was hosting
Kilborn.
and it was I think it was a very different show.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't really that interested in it. But then John had started, I can't even remember what year he started, but he had really started to transition the show to something else. And people were like, no, you got to check it out again.
Got more political.
It got more political.
Yeah.
I think it got very I don't want to comment on the previous show, but I think that, when you think of what Jon Stewart did with The Daily Show, it became this cultural force. And it happened, I was just lucky enough to be there right when that happened. And John's on the cover of Time, and he has this clash with Tucker Carlson. It was an incredible time to be there.
Yeah.
Stephen Colbert was still there. Ed Helms was there. Cordry, Sam B. So
that's an exciting moment in television history.
It was the first time that I had been part of something that felt culturally really relevant. And when I told people, oh, I'm working for this show, people are, oh, I love that show, which was a nice feeling,
So we're talking about The Daily Show. We're talking about early 2000s and this kind of historic thing that you're witnessing.
Yeah.
And so what's next? How does it progress for you?
So I was at The Daily Show for a few years, and while I was there, I started writing what became my first book, The Sheriff of Yernamere. And I wrote it first as a television pilot. But it's funny because I didn't feel any closer to the world of how do I sell a script, even though I was, people would be like, well, you must be somehow connected to the entertainment world because you're The Daily Show. But this stuff is very siloed, So I didn't feel that I had any more entree into that world than anyone else, really.
Right.
I was like, I'll never sell this.
To get optioned. Or
I'll never
to-
get this option. I don't even know who to talk to. I
Do
don't
you
know how
need
to
a
do
different
this.
agent for that as well?
Yeah, I didn't have any. I
Okay.
didn't have any representation at that time.
Because cable and like the union, I'm curious about how. Also, we don't have to get into that right now.
Right.
But where the union lines are drawn, because I feel like cable didn't have like union representation in some certain departments.
That is a complicated.
It's very complicated.
and also delicate thing.
Yes,
I will say
understood.
this: with the rise of reality TV, they started realizing that it was expensive to pay people as WGA Writers Guild members, and they said, "You're not a writer; you're a producer." And people said, oh, "I'm a producer? What? That's incredible."
No
And so what happened is that you were not part of the DGA, even though you're writing.
Right.
So that happened at The Daily Show. It happened at Last Week Tonight. It would even happen at Samantha Bee because it's very hard to get out of that rut. So I don't know how much time of these television shows that I wrote. Right, I'd write an entire block essentially, but would never get credited as a writer. And all the field producers were in that position. This was always a point of contention for everyone.
write an entire block. That's like an entire segment.
Well, you're right. You've written a field segment. That's essentially,
10 minutes, 15 minutes.
Well, it depends. It's 4 to 7 minutes probably. So you've written a large proportion of
and we're
a
talking
block
like
of the show.
commercial to commercial.
Sure, out of a 22-minute show, you've written a big chunk. I had this thing that I wrote as a script, and I didn't know any more than anyone. Maybe you're writing a script right now and you don't know what to do with it. I felt the same way, and for some reason, I felt that the easiest path was to write it as a novel. Mm-hmm. And so I wrote it as a novel. And then I literally went on a site called agentquery.com where you could put all these filters in. You find
It's like
agents.
Ask Jeeves.
It really, exactly. I think it still exists.
Right.
And you can put these filters on and find agents who are looking for people who represent writers who are like you. And then you send them a query letter. And that's what I did.
Stephen Colbert called your first novel, The Sheriff of Yernamere, a science fiction book your grandmother will love if she's a lustful, violent lady.
Yeah. Which is a quote based. I can't even remember whose quote. It's a twist of. Is it an Oscar Wilde quote?
Okay,
I can't even
got
remember.
it.
So he was kind enough to give me a blurb for the book.
That's awesome.
So bless him.
And what is that book about?
It is a sci-fi romp. It is about a guy who's sort of a ne'er-do-well, a guy who wants to be Han Solo, but is too hapless. And the name comes. A Yernamere is a planet that is a your name here. It is a planet that doesn't have a corporate sponsor. This was during the time when all of the stadiums in the country were being bought up and being renamed for the
PNC
corporate.
Bank, Art
exactly.
Center.
And so it was. I thought, like, what if eventually they're going to buy and sponsor planets? And so there's a mythical planet, the final Yernamere, your name here, that no one thinks actually exists, but it does. And there is this sort of idyllic, utopic community there, and our anti-hero Cole, who's on the run, ends up essentially crash landing there and trying to hide out. And then he has to become the sheriff of this community because he's the only one who's really evil enough to be the bad guy. And so he has to defend this community. It's a kind of a Seven Samurai type setup.
Got it. And in terms of, being a storyteller,
Yeah.
and having 4 novels, and I find that to be amazing because every time I sit down, I'm going to write something.
Right.
I'm just like, So, can you talk a bit about your process?
The thing that actually got me to do it, and I had tried to write stuff before. I tried to write, I'd written screenplays. I had one sort of like starter novel, I think when I was an undergrad, that was terrible. But I think the thing that really got me to sit down and work was someone had said, if you write a page a day, you will have a novel at the end of the year. I was like, I can do that. I can't write a novel, but I can write a page. So a page a day.
That's really good advice.
It's the incremental thing. It really is the thing. So,
And do you feel like that's how you wrote that book?
yeah,
Wow.
I was very strict about it.
Right.
And that doesn't mean that I was always write a page a day. Sometimes it'd be like I took a day off, but I wrote 3 pages yesterday.
Right.
So over the course of a week, I have like 7 pages. So yeah, that's how that novel came to be.
And the parallel path of writing this novel and being on the Daily Show, and then there's, obviously time passes and you go on to work for Last Week Tonight.
Yeah, which wasn't in the interim, I left the Daily Show. I kind of got burnt out doing those field pieces. I had this new novel, which was going to be a bestseller. It wasn't. But, I wanted to go off and do other stuff. The economy collapses.
Okay.
2008. Just had a kid. And I got an offer to sort of take over this brand studio in AOL New York.
Right.
And I did that. I ran this studio for 5 years, which was actually kind of fascinating because we did all different sorts of production of all different scales. And we did a lot of music production, like I told you before. Like Beyonce would come in and perform. All these new bands would come in and perform. So it was a really interesting experience. On the other hand, I was very aware that I was not moving towards what I was hoping was my goal.
Because there was no narrative going on. It was news and interviews and music.
Yeah, there was nothing. And it was just also you felt, I think, especially when you were doing sort of digital media at that point, it was a lot of you were feeding off of the real world was elsewhere, right? It was Hollywood, whatever was the production. And then you were making stuff that was similar to that. Or you were getting the celebs to come in and do this thing. You weren't part of the real show. And I missed being part of the real show. I accepted a job from there. I got sort of recruited to be the head of production for the New York Times video department.
Oh, wow. Is that the Times brand studio?
Yeah. Well, no. So Times had a
separate
brand studio, which is a separate thing, and then they had their video department on the editorial
for the
side.
news.
Yeah. Which was a bad decision for everyone involved. So I did not last there very long. I lasted about 8 months, and last week
was this in the building here? And was that built? Yeah,
the one over on 46.
Yeah, cool.
I went to Last Week Tonight because they were launching that, and again, Daily Show people, and it very quickly became clear because they didn't really know what that show was going to be, and then it became clear that wow, it can be John sitting behind a desk and talking. They did not need a field department, so I did like 3 pieces that first season, and that was it.
Yeah.
Then luckily Sam started the show. And
Yeah.
So that was my weird path.
I've watched the 3 top segments that you chose. The Jeb in Winter.
Oh, yeah.
And the Atlantic City one.
Oh, okay.
And
Those are
also the one about Chuck Jones.
Chuck
Chuck
Jones.
Jones will kick your ass. These are hysterical.
This candidate who should be winning, but is instead totally getting his ass handed to him by an oddly tinted compilation of psychiatric symptoms, and by a man who seems like he would lecture a starving kitten on personal responsibility, and then deport that kitten and his family.
So, I mean, it's fascinating because for these Sam B segments, you're doing like everything. You're in it.
Yeah.
You're writing it.
Yeah.
You're directing it. I mean, the narratives that you've sculpted with just these 4-minute, 5-minute pieces are, stellar. I mean, there's so much happening. Like in the Atlantic City one, there's like so much.
There's so much going
happening.
on.
How long did those take? And I'm assuming you don't get a lot of time.
Yeah, the Jeb and Winter piece, which was on the premiere show, the premiere of the show, was luxurious because I could shoot. I went to New Hampshire and followed Jeb around New Hampshire, and we spent like a week shooting it, which was far more than we generally shot. Usually it would be a day or 2 that we'd shoot, and then maybe you do a supplemental interview later on or something like that. In terms of like playing all the different roles, I quickly learned that if I was going to be on camera, then I needed another director. It was just too hard. It's too hard to be like in the moment and be funny and thinking, and it was always good to have someone else. So
Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I can understand that. Did you find that you were always bouncing ideas off this director?
Yeah,
or were you
definitely.
Hey, should I do this? And there was just another ear and eyes to kind of like.
it's very collaborative in the whole way because you're thinking about everything from obviously where are we going to put the camera to. You go in armed with a lot of questions and a lot of jokes and sort of things that you're expecting, but so much of the stuff happens in the moment, and you're improvising in the moment. And some of the funniest moments happen because the person says something unexpected, and then you have to like top them or whatever. And yeah, it's better to have 2 minds or more. Sometimes we would like bring along another writer just to for any sorts of shoot, just to like people who are really funny at writing, being funny on their feet and just being like, just come. And sometimes they'd have great ideas. And so everyone during the interviews is like writing notes, and they're like handing notes to the director and stuff. And so the director is then like, because you do re-asks.
Yes,
we'd finish this interview.
So you can probe a little deeper.
You can
on
probe
something.
a little deeper and also do stupid jokes. I mean,
one of the big things about what we like to do at Diagonal is ideation sessions. When a client comes to us and they're like, "Oh, we need to make some piece of content. And what should we do?" And then we're all like, okay, we figure out what the client's all about, then look at what other people in the space are doing. But it feels like these comedy segments, if you're telling me it's like there's live ideation happening like in the moment. and
Definitely,
we are-
but there's also we literally have we just call them jokers.
Right.
You'd have joker meetings where you'd come up like first of all you'd have brainstorming sessions where you're just trying to come up with segments. What if we did this? What if we did this? And then once you settle on it, and you know who you're going to be talking to, you've done pre-interviews with the people, and you have an idea of the direction that you want to go. You sit down and you do joke meetings, and you just sit around and try to make each other laugh with dumb questions
Gosh,
and
that
silly
sounds
bits. That I mean, when
so
that's
fun.
when it's working, it is the best that you can. It's the best time you're going to have in the office.
Yeah.
Right. Doing anything.
And for each Samantha Bee episode where they're writing teams and you'd go off into like a writer's room to have these jokes,
Yeah.
does everybody come together?
Yeah, you'd get, it would be a mixture of people who are in the field department and people who are writers who are writing for the studio segments, and just a mix of people. And also, then there'd also be informal stuff. It was very hard during the lockdown, to be able to, as you imagine any sort of informal ideation, like you have a chance to stop by and be like, I'm just trying to think of this joke.
Right.
Do you have a joke for this
Right.
thing? What do we? So I really missed that.
Yeah, let's talk. I mean, 2020 hits and you're at Sam B.
Yeah.
And everything is shut down.
Yeah, and we thought the show could just die. It was lucky that it didn't.
And it went virtual and then it
Yeah.
came back.
Yes.
Right? Because the Atlantic City piece was done in 20.
I don't know.
Afterwards.
Yeah.
Like, 'cause
I'm still wearing a mask.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So how did that work? Like
We would do Zoom interviews, which those
we've done a lot of
a
Zoom
lot of
interviews.
Zoom interviews, but
Thousands.
but they got better, right?
Yeah,
As
they
because
did,
you've
they did.
working with this technology, like you've seen this incredible upslope. But at first, it was just Zoom interviews, and then we were getting into this whole thing of like sending people phones to use as cameras, and
We've
it's
tried
hard.
that as well.
It
doesn't
right.
work.
It's
that
hard,
well.
right?
We end up going, we'll just use the webcam.
Totally. It's like we're talking to some senator
Yeah.
who's 72.
Yeah.
It's like, would you please? I know you're not busy.
There was a show we ended up doing which was actually for Nancy Pelosi and raising money or something, and Hillary Clinton was taped and she had an assistant. It was like there was like always someone else to facilitate all that, but you don't get that with everybody.
No,
you don't. So
You don't.
you're not
And-
gonna get that with like a
Right.
sales rep from the middle of the country or someone who's just
Right.
trying to do a piece. So
Yeah.
that was a challenge.
That was a challenge, and the upside about it, maybe you found this the same way, is that people were available to talk.
That's true.
So like do you want to you're probably going stir crazy too. So do you want to spend a half hour talking to me about your new book or about this subject that's near and dear to your heart?
access was
Access was
easier.
yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about the Jeb segment because it is brilliant.
Oh,
I mean,
thank you.
it's like a mini documentary.
Yeah.
When I watch it, I was like, this is like a 5-minute mini documentary about this guy, and I'm just curious. Like, did you write it all? I mean, I know we were just talking about the joke session, but the travel and how did that all come to fruition?
I had this image of watching Jeb's campaign, which seemed to be
I guess we
sputtering.
should set it up too.
Yeah.
Like it's 2015,
Yes.
and it's for the 2016 presidential
Yep.
election, and Jeb is running still. He's still
Yeah.
in the running against he who shall not be named.
Yeah.
And you go out and you meet Jeb on the campaign trail.
Right, and following him around New Hampshire, which is obviously the, early state, and going from town hall to town hall to town hall and talking to people to watch because there was something about it that I thought was so compelling about this sputtering, doom-laden campaign in New Hampshire in the winter, the bleakness of it.
Right.
That it seemed, I was joking around that it was like a Werner Herzog kind of thing. And we tried to get Werner to do the VO, but I did the scratch VO, and as is often the case, you end up, network was happy with the scratch VO, so that's what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just in terms of the sculpting of that narrative.
Yeah.
How quick and what was the path to completion on that?
Shot for about 4 or 5 days, came back, and I can't remember, I probably had a week and a half to edit.
And are you in the room with an editor?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, cool. So you're in the
Absolutely.
room, right over the editor's shoulder.
Right.
And you're saying, I know, because you know everything you have. Because
Exactly.
you were the field producer next to the camera operator.
I had actually done a rough cut first, sitting down with it just to get a better sense in my mind.
Okay.
There was
So you edit as well.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. When I was at Oxford, I also came up in this time.
What doesn't he do,
Oh, jeez.
everyone? What?
I came up at a time when the whole sort of, video journalist thing was like you shoot and you cut on Final Cut Pro.
Stringer,
yeah,
kinda
like so I learned how to do that, which was really valuable.
So you did a pre-edit of
right,
the Jeb?
right, and then just sat with an editor. And I have to say that the team of editors that we had at Full Frontal they were so good and so funny and just.
And it's
so
all in the
good.
same building.
It's all in the same
Everybody's-
building.
Yeah, right.
The way that it was set up was we were in the building, the same building that 60 Minutes was in. And Last Week Tonight was another floor. And then we all shot across the street at CBS Studios.
Got it.
And it was all, fiber connected and everything like that. So stuff would come back to the edit suites. But we were all just right there. So, you just sit in the edit suite. And,
Brilliant.
Yeah. So, God, editing stuff can be a nightmare. Post is a nightmare. But again, when it's going well, then it's a joy, and you're just laughing. So,
Gosh, Michael, the words you just said are ringing so true with us. We are primarily a post-production company.
Yeah,
and when it is going well, it really is going well.
It's going well,
It's a
but
joy.
so much of it is, man,
It's not easy.
You're knitting a sweater, and then when you
Yes.
realize you screwed up, it's like, I got to take the sweater apart now and start again. So, yeah.
And then the Chuck Jones segment is hysterical. I think
that
a
guy.
great question someone on our team was actually Alex right there, who's said, did you get into the political stuff just because by happenstance, or was it something you always kind of were interested in?
I was interested in
Okay.
politics. It was something I sort of naturally followed. I don't know if I followed it to that extent before I was at the Daily Show. Maybe that really got me even more into it and more focused. But yeah.
Have you learned more about politics over the time that you've been on these more political shows?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you see how the sausage gets made. Yeah, definitely.
You continue to write. So
do,
there's
yeah.
4 novels, and I
Yeah.
do. We want to plug your novels, and we're going to put up a picture of all the novels
awesome.
here. Sons of 613, Sheriff of Yurnamir, Bad Decisions Playlist, and Emily and the Spellstone.
Yeah.
There's a lot of sci-fi. You're like, right? Emily and the Spellstone is kind of sci-fi.
Yeah, sort of a set in the real world, sort of
Right.
fantasy elements.
And Bad Decisions Playlist
Is not. So there's 2 realistic YA books.
613.
So, yeah, Sons of the 613 and Bad Decisions Playlist. Yeah.
And tell us a bit about these other stories.
Right. So Sons of the 613 is the 613. There's 613 commandments in the Old Testament.
Wow.
So it's basically vaguely autobiographical story about a kid who's growing up in the suburbs in Minnesota where there's no other Jews. And he's, sort of a cerebral, nervous, intellectual kid. His older brother, who's 21, is just like a friggin' MMA, meathead, alpha male. The kid is going to get bar mitzvahed, and when you are bar mitzvahed, you get up and you say, "Today I am a man." And the older brother is like, "You are not, clearly not a man." So he's left in the care of the older brother for 2 weeks. The parents are out of town. The older brother is like, "We're gonna turn you into a man. We're gonna come up with a set of sort of rites of passage that have vanished from our society. But I'm going to come up with some for you, and you're going to go through them, and you're going to become a man." And so it's about the chaos these two cause in their life. In each other's lives, and this 2-week period.
Wow. So you say vaguely autobiographical.
I was a Jewish kid who grew up.
And did you have a brother as well?
I did not.
No, okay,
I
so
did not
that's
have a brother. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just incredible that you are, involved so deeply with these stories that you can tell them even if they're not part of your actual experience. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's
I
like-
mean, you know how it is. The characters come to life for you and they become real to you.
Yeah.
Like you know them. I was very proud of that. The book was on like a Kirkus Book of the Year list. It was a YALSA, which is a young adult library. I can't even remember, but
we can.
it was one of
put
their
that in
top.
as
Yeah,
a YALSA.
it was sort of an award-winning book in that way. And the next book is the Bad Decisions Playlist, which is about a kid who super talented, another teenage kid, super talented singer-songwriter, but has mental blocks. He can't perform. Thinks his dad is dead. The dad comes back into his life. The dad turns out to be a sort of semi-famous singer-songwriter who kind of flamed out, and now he's back. And again, that's about the chaos that these two cause in each other's life as they try to, reestablish that relationship. That was optioned by Fox.
Wow.
But and it was like many of these stories ended with, and then nothing happened. Yeah.
Well, I mean, to get that far, to get
That was
even
nice.
to that point.
Yeah, it felt like some sort of recognition.
Right.
And
And how does that happen? Someone found it, or you have
Someone
a book
found
agent,
it.
or you have a literary agent? Or
So at that point, I had a book agent, but then Mary Pender, who had been working for a company that basically found IP and would turn it into film and TV, she had found my book. And she had just joined UTA, the agency, and she brought my book along with her. And she contacted me and said, hey, I want to rep you. I want to rep this book. And so she was the one who got that optioned.
It's awesome. I mean, that's fabulous that it got to that level.
Yeah. I mean, I was super, super happy about that.
And then you have Emily and the Spellstone, your most recent novel.
Most recent
When did you
novel.
complete that?
It's been a while.
Yeah, okay.
It's been a while.
But you're also continuing to write.
I am continuing to write. I just finished a draft of something that I sent to my book agent. It's not a very good draft of something.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But and now I'm like, I really have to rewrite this. So
but on Emily and the Spellstone, she finds a cell phone.
yeah, it was entirely inspired by this. My daughter at the time was about 7 or 8, and she and all of her friends desperately wanted to have cell phones. It was like a mark of thing. We were like, you can't have a cell phone; it's going to blow your brain out. You know, it's horrible. And she would take objects and pretend that they were cell phones. They would all, you know. So, yeah, I wrote a story about a girl who, and the idea came to me when I was at the magic show at her school. Kids are doing magic, and I had this idea of like, what if a kid at a magic show actually summoned a demon, like in the midst of a school magic show? And so basically that's what happened. She finds this stone that is actually a spell stone. So it's full of terrible puns about, cell phones, spell stones.
Got it.
And she finds that, and of course there's bad people who want it. She accidentally summons this demon who is like, I'm going to eat you, but I'm bound to serve you. And so they sort of this unlikely friendship forms.
Do you think that to be a really good author, being extremely well read is important?
I always feel
I feel like I'm getting a vibe from you that you read a lot too.
I don't read as much as I should. I feel that the answer is yes. And I feel like I've failed.
I don't know if any of us read as much as we should be. No, okay, I'm going to admit it. It's hard. It's hard to get through a book. I mean, books take the time they take, and reading now in this day and age of just like instant gratification.
Why is it so hard?
It's hard.
It's very hard.
It's hard to sit down and be like, I am reading.
Yeah. There's so many books that I haven't read.
Right.
So many. And I always feel like when I finally have sat down and read these, I've benefited so much. So that has been one of my things of trying to read more books that I didn't read.
And maybe like actually being okay with the time it takes to read, because sometimes I feel like, gosh, I'm a slow reader.
Yeah,
it just takes time to read.
It just feels like you should. I used to spend all the time reading. Right,
Yeah.
I loved to read when I was a kid. I'd have 4 books going at one time, and I'm totally not like that. Well, I've gotten back to reading.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What brought you to New York City first, from Minnesota?
I was in Japan. And I had been traveling, and then I came back to New York, and I was like, I'm just staying here for a little bit before I go traveling again, because I'm a traveling guy. My life is going to be traveling. But I came here because a friend that I used to do improv with was here, Dan Cantor, a very talented actor. So I knew him from doing improv comedy. And so we came, and we were going to write scripts together and do a sketch and everything. And we wrote some stuff together, and some stuff that I found recently. I was like, this is actually pretty funny. So that's what brought me here. But I did not think I was going to stay.
I'm going to bring us back to Jeb in winter for a moment. I
Yeah.
like this question, and it's going to be, a little inspiration from that segment. If you were a beverage, what beverage would you be? I think the answer for the Jeb one was brilliant, and we're going to show a little clip of it.
If Jeb were a drink, what drink would he be?
Milk. Milk is just a normal thing that wouldn't be fantastic if you could choose any drink, but it's a solid drink to have.
That's a good analogy.
But how about you?
If I was a beverage, what beverage would I be? God damn it, don't do that to me. You've turned my own question back on me. I think that I would be some sort of annoying smoothie.
Wow.
Right.
Like an Erewhon smoothie.
Yeah,
Do you
like
know
an
about these?
whatever. Have you
Have you heard about these
yeah.
Erewhon smoothies? They're like $800 or
Really?
something.
Yeah, I don't think
even
it
know.
would be a pricey one, but I'd be like something that would be like, oh, I should probably drink this because it's got kale and whatever.
Wheatgrass.
Right. It's got
it's green.
it's green. It's got Brussels sprouts. That's what I would
Oh
make.
my
Yeah.
God. I like that. All right.
Okay.
John Oliver, John Stewart, Samantha Bee. Just a triangle.
Yeah.
What do you like? Where do you want to go?
Oh, you mean what do I think of them?
Yeah,
Or like
just in terms of those are
Right.
three like big personalities that you've worked with in the past.
Yeah.
And what was intriguing or different, or where is their brilliance
God,
for
they're
each person?
also, I mean, they're all super brilliant and brilliant in different ways. I mean, John was like John Stewart, obviously. I mean, he really revolutionized this genre, and was really committed and really focused on the show. It was incredible. John Oliver also, the same thing, like really cerebral, really funny. And Sam, such an incredible, really funny, and also such a great sketch comedian. She's such a great character actress. And I always loved it when she would do stuff like that on the show. And I always wish there was more. And I hope that for the next part of her career that there's more of that. Because I see that for her as such a, she's so good.
All right, I'm gonna pivot a little bit into now and tomorrow.
Yeah.
So now, here we are, Michael. It's post Sam B. You've written your 4 books. You have a new manuscript. This is kind of an advice show for people that are starting. So,
Right.
what kind of advice do you give to people that are like, I'm in my career, or I'm not 100% sure where I'm going, or where I want to get somewhere? How do I get there?
Yeah, I do think that it is good to be intentional with what you want, to really think this is my goal. And to, even if you're afraid of telling people what it is because you're embarrassed about it, because it sounds silly, that you want to be a writer, you want to do this, you want to direct movies, that be honest with yourself about it, what you want, so that you could then set yourself on the path and dedicate yourself to that. And find,
I just took a really deep breath, by the way, when you said that, because it's resonating with me.
Okay,
so thank
so
you. I was like,
hitting deep.
okay,
Yeah.
I
And
love that intentionality.
I think that that's important, and I don't think that I've necessarily been very successful at that. I've sort of bumpkined my way, like, oh, I'm so lucky I got to do that. Could I have gotten whatever that means, further in my career, or had I been like this? No, this is what I'm going to do. I don't care about any other thing. But you get married, you have a family, you have a child, you start being like, oh, I got to make money. Mm-hmm. It's nice I found that a lot of people who are successful in this field now, either you're on one end of the extreme or the other, right? You're either wealthy, or you're comfortable enough that you don't have to work so that you can focus on your thing, or you're from a background where you're not scared of being like, I will work minimum wage.
Right.
Like
not a starving artist, but
it's hard to be a starving artist
that
now. Yeah.
passion
You want to pursue that passion.
at all.
You got
at
nothing to
any cost,
lose.
really.
You have
yeah.
nothing to lose.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's scary to do
I appreciate that perspective, because I see that as well.
I think it.
It's this middle ground. It's hard to
hard.
live in that.
It is hard
Because also, formerly, I was in like the union production world. And
Right.
the people that are just making that kind of, living are working a lot.
Yes.
They're working a lot
Yeah.
out there on sets and
Yeah.
12-hour days and 14-hour,
Right.
bookending. And it's tough.
It is tough. For that part, I don't have advice. And I think that a lot of people want this reassurance that if you dream it, or if you really work hard, it'll happen and you'll be okay. And it's hard to say that. It's a scary, that the flip side of all of this is the fear. Like, you do all this stuff and you create stuff and you have a certain amount of success, and that it's not necessarily additive all the time. So there is that fear. Like, you can be on a show, you can do this. It doesn't necessarily mean that they will continue in that way. And it's not like, well, I have a law degree and I'm going to be hired.
Right.
So
Yeah, I know.
that stuff is
it's a-
sobering.
It is a circuitous path.
It
I
is
think
a
for all of us
circuitous
in this
path.
film and TV
Right.
and media industry.
Yeah.
So for you, do you have any inclination of where your path is going, or what you want? I mean,
I'll tell
we're
you
talking
what,
about
I-
intention. We're talking about.
I really
we're
like-
getting real here.
Yeah,
Michael.
I really like creating stuff. I had created a scripted series, a comedy series that TBS bought, and then again, like that, it didn't move forward. Another network bought it, and for weird reasons, it didn't move forward. But would I like to create another series and have that and work on that with great people? Yes, I would like that. I'd like that very much. Or to have this manuscript, to get it in some shape that it's
Yeah.
saleable. I'm hoping that is That's what I'm sort of focusing
So
on.
that's like writing a pilot, or is it
Exactly.
And then, so you write the pilot, and then you have to kind of create a book for the first season, and then you have to create a series arc as well. Is this kind of
yeah, it
the way
depends.
you would approach it?
It depends, who's buying it, and like, I think it's very difficult right now. The industry is in a state of contraction, so there's going to be less production,
Right.
I think, and so that's sobering as well. I don't want to be a downer about
No,
all this stuff,
no,
especially
you're
for people.
not. It's not.
The other advice I would give to people is to. It's not my term, but someone talked about friction. Create as much friction as possible by meeting as many people as possible, by doing the improv group or going to the party or doing whatever it takes so that you're constantly meeting people.
Right.
Be involved with it, because you build over the years, you build this network, and it could be 10 years later. That's what I've seen, and everyone else sees that.
There's a return on that.
There is a
investment,
return on that. Oh, we did that thing together. You know who'd be really good at this? So-and-so, I worked with them before. I met them before. The more of that friction that you create, the more of bumping into other people, the higher the chances are of success, especially in an industry like this, which is driven so much by personal relationships.
So I'm also hearing to give time in a way.
Yes. Yeah, I think that is, yeah. And just keep working on your craft.
Right.
We got some questions out here.
All right.
You may have talked about this a little earlier, but did you sort of have a creative identity crisis back when acting and traveling?
It wasn't just a creative identity crisis. It was like an everything identity crisis, because I had these different potential pathways in my life of like, I learned to speak Japanese. There was a clear pathway that involved me going into international relations or business or finance or something like that. I put a deposit down on Columbia's School of International Public Affairs, SIPA, and then I just didn't go. I didn't show up. Yeah, so that was kind of a bifurcation point in my life of like deciding like I'm not going to do that.
And Maria on our team does improv, actually.
Ah,
Yes. And has been taking an improv class.
Excellent. Yeah, I think that's really good. It's funny because sometimes I'll look back and be like, maybe I should have done this, maybe I should have done that. It's so hard to say, I try not to feel too much regret about decisions. Yeah, it's difficult and complicated, and I don't think that there's necessarily like a cathartic moment all the time where you're like, yes, I did it, because there's been moments where everything's going great, and I'm like, yes, I'm doing the right things, and sometimes when it's going bad, it's like, I should have gone to law school, and I don't know if that goes away,
No,
but that's
we never say that,
yeah.
Michael.
Okay, never. Don't say the L word. Yeah. It's hard. When I was a lot younger, both my wife and my girlfriend at the time, we were like, what do we do with our lives? And it was, for some reason, we ended up having this conversation with these friends of my mom or something, this couple who's probably my age now. And they were so great just talking to us. And one thing that the husband said, he said, well, you're not going to figure out what you're going to do just by sitting around and thinking. You got to do something, which is so dumb and simple, but it was like a revelation for me. So I think that what you're doing, if you're doing improv, whatever creative things, like if you're trying to find that path, keep doing stuff. I think stuff is kind of, the path unfolds as you do it.
Yeah, I was going to ask, very fortunate to have gone to a live taping of Samantha Bee, and she's absolutely incredible. In 2016 was a great time to go. Also very fortunate to work at a company with a lot of female representation. There is not a lot of that in late night hosts. I'm curious if the writer's room reflect that, or do the writer's room, are they more balanced? And what do you think? What did you gain from writing for a show with a female host?
That's a good question. So particularly on that show, there was a big effort to make sure that they hired a staff that was half the women, half the people in the writer's room were women. I felt very lucky to be able to write for a show, that I was permitted to write for a show like that.
Garrett?
I got a question. When you're producing a field segment or you're interviewing somebody, do you have any tips to make the interview go really well? Or Yeah, any interviewing tips just to make sure that everything goes according to plan?
I don't think there's any secrets. I think being prepared is such a huge thing. Knowing, like, if they've written the book, read the book. At least skim the book. Know the stuff that you know, know about the person that you're going to be interviewing if you have a chance to do that, and do a pre-interview if you have a chance to do that. But if you're doing like person on the street stuff, so much of it is just listening, right? Really listening to what people are saying.
Do want to talk about a little bit more about inspiration and storytelling, just a little more, because it's something that we navigate on somewhat of a constant basis as a production company. We make a lot of corporate content,
Sure.
and we always have to find a way to amplify that energy and bring it to something that would be watchable,
Right.
and digestible.
Right.
So what could you give us to, like, rules to live by, if you will, when you're talking about storytelling and
Yeah.
inspiration and getting a hook or bringing a viewer in?
Yeah. I think it's different obviously for different, like if you're trying to come up with an idea for some branded campaign for a company, it can be very difficult to find like what is the creative way to do this. Oh man, that stuff is tough. The one thing that I think just in general about ideation and coming up with ideas is that when you have the idea, write the idea down. I know that's kind of not answering the question that you have, but that has been my, like, when it's at night and you have the idea in bed, get out of bed or have the pad of paper next to you and write it down.
Spiral-bound notebook.
Spiral-bound notebook. Write it down and like write down all of those little ideas. Write them down in fragments. You don't have to figure it out, but then you don't know what's going to germinate.
That's a really good piece of advice.
Yeah.
Because I'll have an idea and I don't write it down.
And then you're like, oh, what was that?
Yes, exactly.
I'm always sure I'm going to remember it. Like, this is brilliant.
Right.
And then I'm like, a day later, I'm like, what was that?
Do you have any advice for folks when they're in, like, well, you called it a joke room, but for us it would be like an ideation session or brainstorming. How did you all light those fires?
It's good also to come in prepared to that in terms of like giving people a list of things that you want to hit, so that when people come into the meeting, they're already thinking about stuff, right? Sometimes it's hard to go cold and be like, okay, here's the backstory of this thing we're trying to do, and there's these different facts and this and that. Like, it's good to have something, and maybe you already do that.
Pre-work.
Exactly. So some sort of document that says, here's where we want to go, Here's the tone I'm looking for. Here's the stuff some of the raw material we have to work with.
Right.
To kind of kick that stuff off, I think is really helpful.
And you ran a studio.
I did, yeah.
What challenges did you face in running your own? It was almost like running your own company in a
Yeah.
way. You were running a company of technicians and studio folks. What challenges did you face, and how did you come up with solutions for that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the challenges that would come were resource constraints or asks that were unexpected. I would imagine you have a somewhat different thing in that there is a feedback mechanism in that if someone comes to you and says, we need this thing, we got to have it now, we got to do this thing, you say, well, we can do that. It will cost you X amount of money. And they will then make a decision. Or there's some pricing that you can build into it. When you're working as an in-house creative shop, you often have the problem of there's no constraints other than someone has to be the bad guy and be like, oh, I'm sorry, we can't do this. We don't have the resources. Like, oh, we really need this thing, because there's no billing. There's nothing like that. I mean, there was, we would bill back to these different units, but that was our services were in demand, thankfully. But people would show up with curveballs.
Yeah. And so it was just living in the solution and
yeah,
using what you had at your disposal to kind of like
and we wanted to be. I feel like I was able to build a team of really good people who really worked hard and were really good at what they did, and we wanted to please people. And I think that we had a reputation as a unit that got stuff done. So
wow,
I was proud of that.
Well, you were kind of like speaking our language just then.
Hi, guys.
I want to, on the behalf of everybody on our team, even the folks that couldn't make it, say thank you. You are a member of the in crowd.
Oh, wow.
Michael, you're even leaving with the mug. Okay, a little plug. If you want to be on the show, you get a mug. No, but I wanted to say thank you, and it was a super insightful conversation. I'm walking away with a lot from this, and I know our team will as well, and our listeners. So thanks for coming.
Oh
to
man, thank
be
you
on
so
the
much
In-Crowd.
for having me here. It's very self-conscious making to like talk about oneself, but thank you.
Yeah, but the reason we do this is because these stories are valuable, very valuable for folks to hear. If this is something that someone wants to become, or
Yeah.
it's just like any of the pitfalls and the glory and the successes and the path that you took to get where you are today. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having
All
me.
right. High five.
Oh,
We're gonna go up. We're going up.
Okay.
Okay.
That wasn't awkward.
We'll see you next time.